Hello, everybody, and welcome to Generally Speaking, the podcast. I am your host, Jennifer Snook, and I am so excited to dive in. I know most of you probably know me from my TikTok channel, Generally Speaking, where I share my hot takes about what's happening in the world of reality TV and with your favorite housewives, some personal growth content, and where I share some personal experiences and some of my own juicy stories. And don't worry, this is still going to be your go-to channel for all things Housewives and Bravo and all that good stuff. But my hope with this podcast is that we can bridge the worlds between pop culture and personal development, because we're going to get really deep about some really shallow shit. And also with this new platform, we're going to be able to go really deep about the really deep stuff and the stuff that really matters. And I honestly am just so excited about having this space, because now we have an opportunity to really dive in and really learn together and really get an opportunity to laugh together and honestly just come together in a way that helps make, the world a little easier for each other. Because this shit is hard. Life is fucking hard. But the truth is it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. There is an easier way, and I am here to be that bridge for you, and I am here to help. And so what we're going to do is use what's happening in the world around us in pop culture and in the lives of our favorite reality TV stars to examine what's happening in our own lives and to look at the challenges that we all go through and the similarities between them all. Because the truth is, we do all have adversities and roadblocks and hardships that we all go through because we're supposed to. They are an important part of our human curriculum, but our hardest days don't have to define us. And I'm here to prove to you that no matter where you are in your life today, tomorrow does not have to look the same. Because the truth is that you are only ever one decision away from creating a life that you actually love living. And I know that because I did it myself. And honestly, that's why I'm here, to help show you how you can do it too. My own personal transformation from the person that I used to be to the person that I am today, the person technically that I've been for the last 11 years, was so powerful and life-changing and honestly transformational on a cellular level that helping people became my calling. Not something that, I should do, or not something that sounded good, but something that I had to do. And it was funny because the more I worked on myself and my own personal growth, and the more that I grew, the more that I could then, as I was watching these shows, see where they weren't growing. And I could recognize old similar patterns and see where they were stuck. And I could recognize it because I used to be in that same spot. I used to act very the same way or very similar. So let's get into the personal transformation I'm talking about. So I carried around a huge amount of pain for a large portion of my life. And the seed of that pain was planted in my childhood. I grew up in a household that was like a domestic war zone, honestly. My dad was addicted to drugs, and my mom was addicted to fighting him about his drug addiction. I was an only child for 7 years, and then my mom decided to have 3 more kids with the same man who made her so miserable every single day. So I went from being 7 with no siblings to 11 with 3. And so now it's not just me I have to look out for. Now I have these 3 monkeys that I need to protect. And living in that chaos every day, it shaped the way that I looked at life. It shaped the way I saw myself. It honestly set my entire foundation. And so fast forward through my life, and I can't seem to stop sabotaging myself. Cut to a few more years down the line, and I'm now going through a divorce with the man that I married. The same one who, at the time, seemed honestly like the perfect person to marry because he checked both of my big boxes. He was, number 1, the polar opposite of my dad. And number 2, and most importantly, he wasn't a drug addict. He didn't do drugs at all. And I thought that choosing someone like him was going to be the key to me living a happy life. Like, as long as drugs were out of the picture, everything would be great. But everything wasn't great. Gareth traveled constantly, and after 5 years and 3 kids, I wanted out. I had fallen in love with another man, and I wanted to be with him. Actually, I knew that I needed to be with him, but it was a really hard decision to make and not something that I took lightly at all. But when I told my mom, she turned her back on me, and that completely broke my heart. Just because I had always stood so steadfastly by, every dysfunctional decision that my mother made. After every fight that she had with my dad, after every time that she promised me that that fight would be the last fight, but it never was, I still always stood by her side. But when I actually, this time, needed some support from her, there was just absolutely, there was none to be had. She was pissed at me, and my mom and I went for 18 months or something without talking. After about 7 years together, my relationship with Tony started to fall apart. And when it started to fall apart, I did too. And the first time that I ever got high was actually accidental. I had been looking for something to get rid of my headache, just Advil or something like that. I didn't have any, my friend didn't have any, but they handed me a pill. And I took that pill, and within a few minutes, my headache was gone. But a few minutes later, I started feeling a sensation that I had only ever heard about. For the very first time in my entire life, I felt a profound sense of inner peace. And it was the greatest thing that I had ever felt in my entire fucking life. I knew that the pills could not be a long-term, solution to my problems. I knew that. But at that point, they were the only thing that had ever given me a sense of hope, like this sense of inner peace I'm talking about, and a feeling like everything was going to be okay. And I had never felt that. My poor nervous system was so desperate for relief, so I gave it some. I honestly didn't care if it was wrong at this point. My poor spirit had been broken into a million pieces by this point. And each time I took a pill, I suddenly felt safe and secure and hopeful, like I was honestly being glued back together, which you can imagine is very confusing for a girl who spent her whole life vilifying people who did drugs. And I did vilify them. But now here I was relying on drugs to help me. Those pills held my hand as I walked out of that relationship that I had sacrificed my family for. And honestly, I felt grateful because I had never felt so broken. I mean, I put on a brave face, but it was all just a facade. I was dying inside. The girls and I then got our own place, and truly my sadness spiral just continued. I mean, the wreckage from that last relationship spiritually just ruined me because it was just more pain, layered on top of all of that other unhealed pain. Mike came into my life. Well, I mean, technically he came into my life in 2003. But when I met Mike, I was in massage school and I was still in my relationship with Tony. So we stayed friend-zoned until 2006. Mike was a lot different to all the other guys I'd been with. And by different, I mean, well, Mike was different in a lot of ways. But with Mike, I felt maybe acceptance. Mike knew that I was using pills and he loved me anyway. But I mean, I didn't. The more I used drugs, the more I hated myself. My mom had always called me Little Al. And now when I was looking in the mirror, that's exactly who I was seeing. My dad, the same person who I always said that I would never be like. And now I was the one doing dumb shit. Now I was the one lying to people that I loved. And I mean, disappearing to get drugs. It was so fucking gross. My brother would call me and bawl me out. My mom would say shit to me that only ever made me feel worse. And there were times I passed out. There was this one time after I took an Ambien that I, unbeknownst to me, drove into town, stole a pumpkin from the grocery store, and came home, drove home with it. And I didn't even fucking realize that any of this happened until I woke up the next day, walked out into my kitchen and wondered, how the hell I didn't have a clue where the pumpkin came from. And a few hours later, all of a sudden my memory broke and I remembered everything. But up until that point, I was convinced that someone had broken my house and dropped a pumpkin off. For a while there, it got rough. It really did. And by the time I decided that I was ready to get help, I was actually taking an OxyContin and a Percocet chaser just to get out of bed. Rehab was an experience and a half. It really was. I had done a lot of homework on the whole, rehab experience before I even left, just because I wanted to know what to expect. Just basically how bad the whole experience was going to hurt. You know what I mean? Like how long the withdrawals were expected. And so everything that I read said that the withdrawals, the worst part of it is over on like day 4 or day 5, right? So on day 5, I was still on the couch, laid out, feeling like full on shit. I mean, I'm feeling so weak that even just the thought of getting up to pee is completely overwhelming. So then I say to the doctor, I thought this was supposed to be easier, start getting easier by now. And then he goes on to say, oh, well, it normally does, but sometimes it takes longer. And then he says that he goes, well, there's something I could put you on. It'll take your aches and pains away and it'll give you some energy back and it'll actually stop you from craving any other opiates. And I can't believe what I'm hearing. I'm like, what? You have what? I mean, this stuff sounded too good to be true, but here was this doctor telling me otherwise. So the very next day, I start taking 32 milligrams of this stuff called Suboxone. I was in rehab the entire month of March, and I remember it because March is my birthday month, and my ex-husband was scheduled to bring my kids down to visit on my birthday. And I remember being absolutely just overjoyed. I was so excited. I was counting every day until I got to see them. And then we were in group one morning, and I will never forget that they came in and announced that they were going to do some random urine tests. So we all take these urine tests and they bring us back together and they said 3 of you peed dirty. And they told me that I was one of them. Now, I knew for a fact that I had done nothing. I had not taken anything. There was no reason that I should be peeing dirty at all. So, I mean, and they're just being so, adamant about it. No, you're definitely dirty. And I'm thinking at this point, I'm in some like alternate universe because I know my truth, right? But these fuckers get on the phone and call my ex-husband and tell him to cancel the trip with the girls because instead of him coming down here, I was going to be going back home and that I would be arriving tonight. And then, so they put me on the phone with Gareth, and you can imagine, now I'm talking to Gareth going, I swear to God, I don't know what they're talking about. They're wrong. This can't be real. They're lying, but now mind you, I'm the same person that's been lying for the last few years trying to cover up this stupid drug addiction that I developed. So why would anyone believe me? But it was the truth, right? And I told Gareth, I am not leaving here. I came here to get clean. I remember being so upset when we were in that group after they brought the results back. One of the counselors got up and said in front of the entire group, Jennifer, I thought you said you wanted to get your life back. And I remember sitting in that audience and I just wanted to go at her neck because I knew I was clean. So I sat on my bed and I said, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving until you give me another better test. I said, you can take my blood, you can take my fucking bone marrow. I didn't care because, I mean, at this point, I'm thinking I'm being set up or something. It is just so like, this is nuts. So they give me another test and I sit on my bed and they walked in and they apologized to me. And they said, we're so sorry. And I said, yeah, well, not as fucking sorry as I am because imagine my kids just got told that they weren't going to be able to go down and see their mom. They're probably thinking that I completely fucked up. I know my ex-husband is thinking that I'm on my way home because I fucked up. My family thinks I'm on my way home. I was so upset, but also in the next breath, so glad that I finally got the actual results. So in the end, I was negative. In the end, I got to stay. And in the end, we got a whopping $1,000 off our very expensive bill. So after 30 long days, I returned home, but now I'm armed with 32 milligrams of Suboxone to help keep me strong, to curb my cravings, and to stop me from being able to even get high. So I'm very confident where things are going. But it wasn't long after I was home that I realized that those Suboxone pills were honestly not any different than those fucking pills that came before them, because if I didn't take these Suboxone pills precisely on time, I'd start falling into an opiate withdrawal that was no different than the other opiate withdrawals, except for the fact that it felt even stronger. Because, truth be told, Suboxone is stronger, and it actually binds to your opiate receptors 10 times stronger than regular opiates do. But nobody tells you that. These pills were heavy duty. I mean, you had to sign a contract, and they weren't covered by insurance. Everything was cash. The doctor's appointment, the script, the pills, all of it. Suboxone is a huge money-making machine. Listen, Suboxone has its place. It actually has two places. The first one is to be a bridge. Like if you're an opiate addict and you're trying to get off, Suboxone can be a bridge. That's number one. Number two, if you are one of those people who have just ultimately resigned yourself to a lifetime of addiction and you can never fathom or imagine getting off, right? And you just know that if you do, that you're going to just be chasing that high for the rest of your life. If you're resigned to that, then Suboxone is a better option because you can go to the doctor and you can live some semblance of a normal life without the fear of having to chase a high and, ending up back on the streets. They market Suboxone like it's a wonder drug, but honestly, Suboxone is fucking brutal. I hadn't been home for all that long before Suboxone started giving me night terrors every single night. I had the most violent, scary, I'm talking terrifying nightmares, and I knew that it was because of that Suboxone. And so then I went and told my doctor that I wanted to wean off of it, and he fought me tooth and nail because, obviously Suboxone is a cash cow. So the doctors don't really want you off. They want to keep you on that as long as possible. And trust me, when you are on Suboxone, you are addicted at the highest level. You're just not chasing the high, which is great, but you're still addicted. And you know how you know if you're addicted? If you fear being without it. And the fear of running out of Suboxone and falling into those withdrawals was terrifying. But I knew that the only way to get this shit out of my system was to dance with that devil. Mike and I were in a shitty spot, but his house still felt like the safest place to detox that shit out of my system. So I went there, and I spent 3 weeks holed up in my own personal hell. This detox was 100 times harder than the one that I did in rehab before I started Suboxone. This made that look like a walk in the park. It was honestly like being in a wrestling match every day with the devil, and the rounds just didn't let up. It was just ding, back at it, fight, 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 fight. Just wrestling with every thought you've ever had, every decision you've ever made, every mistake you've ever made, going over every regret. It was just a lot. And meanwhile, physically, your body is just in complete just shambles. The shakes, the aches, the nausea, all of it. It was a nightmare. But I did it. And after a few weeks of having less than zero strength, I woke up one day and felt like I wanted to dance. I was able to feel like some organic strength, like building and surging through me again. And I got so excited. I remember driving home and into the driveway and just feeling so ready for a fresh start. And it wasn't long after that my tailor won a huge talent competition, and with that win came an LA-based agent that wanted to sign her, but the only catch was that we needed to move to LA. So the summer before my oldest daughter began her senior year of high school, I left everything that I had ever known, and we moved our entire family from the Bay to LA. Me, my ex, my kids, and Mike. who at this point was only going to be coming down on the weekends. We hadn't even been in LA for 2 weeks before we somehow got a meeting with a heavyweight producer. There was talk about a reality-based show around the unconventional fabric of our family, because one night we all went to dinner in Malibu, and some people thought that the fact that I was at dinner with my ex-husband, our kids, and my current was like wild, which to us it wasn't. I'd been with Mike for 6 years at that point, and Mike and Gareth and the kids and I always did stuff together. But they thought it was super interesting and wanted to explore our family dynamic, like our full family dynamic. So then naturally I called my mom and asked her to come down and join us, because my mom's a powerhouse personality and she's always had a huge voice in our world. So it to me, it made sense for her to be there. The people who came from the meeting had not even been gone 5 minutes before my mom sensed a disturbance between me and Mike and started launching into her little owl narrative, because of course, whatever was wrong couldn't be Mike. I'm just like, you know who. She tells me that I'm just this selfish, awful person and I don't think of anyone but myself. And I'm just like my dad, who, mind you, is the same guy that she says ruined her life. I honestly couldn't believe what she was saying. I couldn't believe that I was all the way here in LA, in this completely new place, in a whole new environment, wanting a fresh start so desperately. But there I was, still dealing with this same shit. And after a huge screaming match on my ex-husband's front lawn, I realized that I was never going to escape it. So it just, at that point, became very logical. The only way for me to escape her judgment and my pain was to end my life. So on the drive back to Extended Stay America on Ventura Boulevard, where I'd been staying, I decided that I would find a steep cliff and drive off it. I wasn't going to do it that day, but I was definitely going to do it. And I wanted it to look like an accident because I really didn't want to saddle my kids with the whole, their mom committed suicide. I honestly thought that overdosing would be the easiest, but then I didn't want them to think that the pills won, It was such a fucked up day. I will never forget that. I remember sitting in the parking lot of that Extended Stay America and just being so very sad. I was 40 years old and just very logically planning to end my life. And I remember so vividly wanting pills badly. I was just in so much emotional pain and desperate for it to stop. But I was new to town. I'd only been here a couple of weeks. I didn't have any connections. I didn't know where to go. So then I sat there thinking, what am I going to do? And it was like a Sunday night. I'm like, oh, I'll have to go to the emergency room and lie and, do all that bullshit to try and get a prescription. Or I could drive back up to the Bay. But then, how pathetic is that? There I am driving 5 hours to go get pills. So what? I'm officially back on that hamster wheel. It was just so depressing. I wanted that familiar comfort of a pill so badly, but I also didn't want to go backwards. So there I am sitting in the Extended Stay America parking lot, completely terrified and sad. And then for the very first time in my life, I decided to look up at the sky and I said, I know I've never done this before, but if there's help out there to be had, then this is me asking for it. This is me asking for help. And then within just a day of my big ask, the universe started to answer. We found the perfect little home and moved into that. Everything started clicking in a way that it never had. And then I began receiving messages from beyond any realm that I had ever known up until this point. Visions of the interconnectedness of all things. There was a series of shifts in my consciousness that were just so profound. And I began to experience this deep rising up of self-awareness. And it was almost like I thought I was hallucinating, except I was sober as a stone. Everything that I ever thought that I believed began to dissolve. And I remember struggling to find the words to express and explain to Mike and the kids and my family what I was going through. All of the social constructs that I'd spent so much of my life paying attention to and trying to build my life around all faded away. And I began to understand that love is not just our human foundation, but it is the inner invisible fascia that holds this entire human experience together. And I realized just how important it is to stay rooted in love so that you don't get lost in fear. And I started to see how sneaky fear can be and how it's constantly showing up every day in 100 different ways, trying to scare you into playing small. I learned that in order to step out of your own shadow, you need to muster up the guts to tell fear to fuck off. Basically, I realized that I'd been looking at the world all wrong, and after 40 years of holding a grudge against my dad, I finally forgave him. And not just in words, but with my full heart. And then when I forgave my dad, I healed my own heart, finally. And when I accepted my dad for who he was, as he was, it was only then that I was finally, this still makes me emotional, I was finally able to accept myself the same way. And then my own self-acceptance and self-love healed that lifetime of hurt. And that ache that I carried for so long finally stopped. And it was replaced with love and light and an overwhelming sense of gratitude for every single step of the journey that got me here, for my history, for my heartaches, and for all the people who paved my path. I call what I experienced my spiritual orgasm, and I have been bathing in its beautiful afterglow every day for the last 11 years. And I can honestly say that every day since has been like bliss. And that doesn't mean that every day is perfect at all. But compared to the life that I used to live, bliss. And never once, not one time in 11 years have I craved an opiate, not even a little. Because when you align yourself with the light and the love, then you become the light and the love. And at that point, anything is possible.